In today's video, I'm going to share my experience with postpartum depression. So given my history with trauma, it was brought up to me many times throughout my pregnancy by my midwife that I was at higher risk for postpartum depression. And that's something that I kept at the back of my mind throughout my pregnancy, that during the recovery, postpartum was definitely a huge possibility for me to experience. So again, that was at the back of my mind. And then fast forward to after I gave birth to Josie, those couple of days at the hospital were definitely a little bit weird for me. So first I'll talk about when I moved from the labor and delivery room to the mom and baby room. I forget the official name. It might be mom and baby room. But when I was there, that first day, since I had to get an epidural, I needed help standing up. Like my legs would have buckled beneath me had I not had help. So I had to use a walker, and one of the nurses had to help me to the bathroom. And I just remember not feeling great. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I couldn't feel if I had to or not, and I couldn't feel if I was pushing like to pee or not. But I ended up not peeing, and then I got moved to the other room, the mom and baby room, as I call it, in a wheelchair. And then when I was there, the nurse introduced herself to me, but the nurse that moved me to the room, who introduced me to the new nurse that I had in the new room, kind of did a brief summary of who I was and mentioned the trauma and the past to her, not in details, but like that I had history of that because it would affect the care given, I would assume. And I'm glad that she did do that because when that second nurse helped me to the bathroom, I was in a lot of pain. And then she was saying, it's probably because your bladder is really full right now. And that's probably why you feel as much discomfort as you are. And then when I sat down, I was just in so much pain. I remember feeling anxious. I don't know if I knew I was feeling anxious at the time, but I just started crying. I was peeing and crying. It wasn't a beautiful sight. But then the nurse was like telling me it's okay. Like she sat down on the bathroom floor and looked me in the eye and was saying, you know what, I have anxiety too. And you know what really helps me, and then she gave me some anxiety tips. I can't really remember them exactly, but she also said like she noticed that I was struggling to pee. Like I knew I had the urge to pee more, but I couldn't feel what I was doing, so I couldn't tell like if I was pushing hard enough. And then she gave me advice to like blow out, like just I don't know how to describe that clearly. Like I was blowing through a straw, I guess. And that really helped me empty my bladder more. And she was giving me advice like that. But also she called for help from another nurse. And she said, I have a patient here who I'm pretty sure she's having an anxiety attack right now. And also I think she's starting to dissociate, which was a huge aha moment for me because the feeling that I had in that moment, I recognized it so much because I've had it so much throughout my life, but I never really stopped to think what was happening in those moments. So the fact that she said, I think she's dissociating, hit me hard because I have a problem with dissociation, but I never really recognized the feeling of me falling into a dissociative state. So her saying that really highlighted to me, oh, that's what that feeling is. Like whenever I feel that, I'm starting to dissociate. And then she helped me back to the bed, and she was an amazing nurse. Like she really helped me. But then the next nurse I had was very helpful as well. I didn't want Drew to leave me in the room too much, so I was asking for a lot of help when it came to simple things like, could you get me more water, or could you grab me this? And there were things that other people were doing for themselves. Like one time Drew got more water that day, and he noticed like there was another mom who had delivered who was doing those things for herself. And I felt bad a little bit asking for the nurse to do those things, but at the same time I didn't want Drew to leave me alone because doctor's offices and hospitals give me a lot of anxiety. I'm not sure why, but I know that they do. Like I feel very uncomfortable and unsafe, and I become very prone to like having really bad anxiety and panic attacks. So I really didn't want him to leave. But that nurse was very understanding and very helpful. But then the night nurse that I had, the second night, wasn't so understanding. She kind of made me, not kind of, she did make me feel guilty about asking for help. Like it was very clear that she didn't want to do those things. Like she would sigh or like just show an attitude through it. And then it was very difficult that night. She wasn't very helpful when it came to, okay, I'll just say what happened. She was very strict on feeding the baby every 3 hours, which she was luckily didn't have a hard time latching on, but it was just very painful for me those first couple of days. So she wanted to latch on very strongly, but it hurt. So like I would react, like pull her away, and then it was hard to figure that out. So by the time that she would be fully latched on and fully fed, it would be an hour and a half. So then I would set her down, and then it would be an hour and a half later that the nurse would come and wake me up. And I say that to say that that night I didn't get much sleep because I was being woke up pretty much every hour and a half. And then also I would like to say that I take medicine at night that makes me a little bit drowsy. So when she was waking me up every hour and a half, like, well, every 3 hours, but I had only gotten an hour and a half of sleep, I was, one, tired because I wasn't getting enough sleep, but two, I was drowsy from the medicine, and she wasn't waiting for me to be fully alert before she handed me my baby. Like I would open my eyes and then all of a sudden my baby was in my hand. And one of the times I was really concerned about getting up with my baby because I didn't want to trip or something like that. Like I didn't want to hurt her. And I asked for her to come back to the room because Drew hadn't gotten much sleep either. I could tell that like she needed her diaper change, so I was asking if she could help us with that because again, both of us were really exhausted, and I didn't want an accident to happen due to exhaustion and then us have to carry the guilt of that. And she was not very understanding of that. And I'm not saying all this to like trash their nurse, but it's just what happened, and I think it contributed to my postpartum depression. And I say that because her reaction to all this, I'm thinking through it clearly now in hindsight, where I realized that I don't think I was asking too much, but in the moment where I already found myself with anxiety building up and I didn't realize again that that was happening, I felt like I was failing as a mom. Like I was like, all right, like I'm asking for this much help as it is, like I'm being unreasonable, which honestly I don't think I was. Like, but anyways, I went into the next day with that mind frame. Like I was exhausted and I was just feeling like a failure of a mom. And that nurse the next day, she was better and she gave me a lot of advice. And luckily, before I left, since I had, again, history of trauma, I mentioned that to the birth navigator. She told me to speak to a social worker that worked at the hospital, and that social worker stopped by my room before I was discharged. And she asked me how I had been feeling, and I was very honest with her. Like, I was like, I feel like I've been dissociating a lot, which, again, thank you to the first night nurse that I had for pointing that out to me. And I was just saying, I just feel very disconnected a little bit. Like I love my baby, but I just feel disconnected from reality. And then she asked me when I had my next medicine appointment, which was like a couple weeks away. And she asked me if there was any way for me to move it up, which I'm glad she did, because I wouldn't have thought of that. Like as obvious as it seems to me now, I really wouldn't have thought of that. And I called to get it moved up, which luckily I was able to get it moved up to a couple days after my discharge. So knowing that I had the medicine appointment a lot sooner really helped me. But the rest of the day, looking back on it, I definitely felt still dissociated and anxious, but in the moment I didn't realize that was happening again. I was just, thinking, okay, everything's fine now. But then it brings me to that first night. Oh my gosh, I didn't know about this until my friend told me about this later after I explained what I'm about to explain to you guys to her. She was like, the second night is really hard. Like, that's a thing. So what ended up happening was Drew and I were going to that night, basically 3 days without sleep, because I went into labor in the middle of the night. So it had been 3 nights without good sleep. And Josie was just crying a lot. We were both exhausted, and Drew knew I was really tired, so he was trying to help with Josie as much as he could. So he was trying to keep from waking me up, but she was crying because she was hungry, and we're doing exclusively breastfeeding, and I hadn't pumped yet. I had to be awake to breastfeed her, and then he woke me up, but a very scary thing happened when he woke me up. I was so exhausted, and I remember when I woke up, I had this flash of very strong depression. I've had suicidal thoughts in the past, but they've always been very passive, and if I felt them starting to change, I would immediately get help. But something that was very scary that happened, honestly, I haven't even told Drew about this, is I immediately felt like I wanted to kill myself, and it only lasted like 1 second, but that 1 second was very terrifying because I've never felt like I wanted to do that like very surely, and I was just scared if I experienced that emotion again that I would give into it. Like, it was that terrifying. And Drew, I didn't tell Drew this, but he saw a look on my face. He didn't describe it to me, but it made him very concerned. And I just told him, because I felt like he was carrying the weight of both of us, because, you know, while we were in the hospital, he saw how emotional I was. And he had been changing all the diapers because I had a hard time getting up. Like, walking around is painful for me. Luckily, that went away pretty fast, but I just felt very useless. The fact that I needed help walking to the bathroom, I felt like my independence was taken from me. And again, I'm very fortunate that that didn't last very long, but that's just how I felt. And then I didn't want to add any more to his plate. So I told him, you know, like, you're very exhausted, just go downstairs. Let me have Josie, I'll feed her. Like, I'm more awake now, I really was. And I was just very, like, I needed to distract my mind, and I did. I just knew, or I just felt that, again, I couldn't add more to his plate, but I got through the night, and then I was able to get some sleep. Luckily, she sleeps a good stretch during the night once she feels fully fed. But that next day, I felt better in the morning. Like, I felt like a new person, and in hindsight, I know I wasn't great, but I was just a lot better than I felt at the low of the night before. So during the day, it was just really hard to get through the whole day. Like, I would feel fine, and then all of a sudden I would feel a wave of strong depression. And again, whenever the wave hit, it wasn't as extreme as that 1 second that I described, but it was a lot of sadness, and I felt like I could not control it. So then I talked to Drew about it, and I mentioned to him, you know, luckily I have this medicine appointment coming up, because again, I didn't want to add too much weight onto his shoulders, so I didn't want to like terrify him. But he was very supportive, and he was just saying, you know, they warned us about these feelings. Luckily, you know, we knew to expect this, and this this can be explained, so that should be comforting to you to know that this isn't going to last excuse me, forever. And that did help me. But also, as he was supporting me, I couldn't help but to think about women who have to go through this alone, who have to go through this whole experience alone. I think, like, I don't think I'd be able to do that. Like, power to them, but at the same time, I feel so much for those women, because that's a lot, and I feel like they don't always get the credit for that. Like, people, at least myself, like, I didn't fully understand the gravity of like having to go through childbirth alone. And like, I knew it would be hard, but like the hormonal changes, and like, even if you just get baby blues, it's not just baby blues. Like, it's hard to go through. And it sucks that some people have to like put a superhero cap on and be like superwomen and have to deal with it themselves. Like, I feel for that, and I really hope that women in those situations reach out to support groups if they don't have anyone in their personal lives to help them do that. But I will talk about the support group that I feel is very beneficial at the end of this video. But first, I'll keep describing what that second day was like for me. So I already described what like the daytime was like, but that second night was very similar to the first night. Only that this time it was a little bit easier because I felt a little bit more confident with breastfeeding. Like, I was a little less timid about pulling her away. Something that I didn't mention is the first couple of days, I didn't even think to use nipple cream. I don't know why. Like, I was just overwhelmed with feeling anxious that it just slipped my mind. And that's something that also contributed to my feelings of feeling like a failure of a mother, is when I was struggling to not latch, because Josie never had a problem with latching, but with the pain that came with latching. One of the nurses, the nurse that I actually had a difficult time with, made a comment like, you didn't take a breastfeeding class? And she would just make comments like that. And I was saying, yes, I did take a breastfeeding class. And I felt the need to constantly defend myself, which just kept making me feel like a failure. Which, something that I do want to say really quickly about nurses is, if after you give birth, don't let the nurses guilt you for asking for help. Like, if they feel like if they feel like helping you with simple things is below them, then they shouldn't have that job. Like, they're not doing you a favor by helping you. They're getting paid to do that. They chose that job. They chose to be there. Do not let them guilt you for asking for help. Because I did do that, and I shouldered the burden of like that guilt, and it's not fair. Like, I was already going through enough. I don't feel like I should have had to explain myself and say the reason why I'm asking you to do all these things is because there's trauma in the past and that affects me being alone. Like, no, that's none of their fucking business. Like, it's not. So don't let any nurse make you feel that way. With that said, that second night was a little bit easier for me, but I did get that 1 second scare one of the times that I woke up. I think I was trying to do an alarm. I can't remember. Or maybe Josie woke me up with her crying. But it was very scary. And I think I had my medicine appointment that next day. And during that, like, I was just really explaining, like, I know we tried, or we've talked about keeping my medicine at the same dosage, because while I was pregnant, and then now that I plan on breastfeeding, but I'm really struggling right now, and I think I need an increase in my dosage. But my psychiatrist, suggested, instead of increasing the dosage of my mood stabilizer, to add an antidepressant to what I was taking. And I'm very thankful for this. I honestly noticed a little bit of a difference after 1 day of taking it. I mean, that's not to say it was like a magical difference, but it was still noticeable. And then I looked it up, and it said you should really notice the difference after a week or two, and the full effect 4 to 6 weeks in. I think it's been about 6 weeks now. A week or two in, like I said, I noticed a difference after the first day, and then a week or two in, more of a difference, and then 6 weeks now, like, I don't feel those waves of depression, and I don't feel that heaviness anymore. I mean, there's still different things that I have to work on because of my past, but I no longer feel that I have the added struggle of hormonal changes due to my pregnancy. But with that said, I would really like to make it a point to say, for people who are about to give birth, even if you don't have history of mental health, even if you don't have history of past trauma, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you make a medicine appointment, either if it's with your primary doctor or if you want to see a psychiatrist, then do an intake appointment before you give birth, like at least a month before. And I say this because when making an appointment with a psychiatrist, if you don't have experience with that, making that first appointment as a new patient, sometimes the appointments can be a month away or 2 months away for that first new patient, just because the new patient appointments sometimes often take a lot longer than just a normal check-in. And I say this because if you are experiencing baby blues, or if you are starting to notice the symptoms of postpartum depression, a month or two is a long time. It's a long time to experience that, especially when you have the exhaustion that comes with having a newborn. It's really hard. So having that already taken care of, if you want to add medicine, then when you call, it's more likely that you'll have an appointment like a week or two later, or sometimes even that same week, just because you've already done the intake work. I'm sorry if you hear Josie crying in the background. She's downstairs. She's just really loud. But anyways, I really do recommend that. And if you have any doubts at all, like if you do have an inclination that you are going to need medicine, don't feel any shame in that. And I don't know if it's possible to ask doctors to prescribe you medicine ahead of time, to be proactive about that. But if it is, I would suggest doing that, just because I'm telling you, it's very strong, the feelings. And not only is it strong, the thing that's scary about them that I mentioned before, but I really want to highlight, is that it hits you in waves that you just cannot plan for. It's not always, at least for me, it wasn't just a gradual build. Like I felt myself slipping into depression. Like I felt fine, and then all of a sudden I felt completely terrible. Like it was just such a huge jump, and it was something that was completely out of my control, that it's possible to feel that more severely. And if you do, like, I just can't emphasize enough how serious of an issue this is, and how serious it should be taken. And if, like me, in the hospital, you're starting to feel yourself falling into sadness, do not wait for that to build up. Like, don't think, oh, I can control it now. And if it gets worse, then I can help then. No, as soon as you start feeling any inclination that you might, start heading towards postpartum, or even if you're questioning it at all, make an appointment with, again, a psychiatrist, your primary doctor, your OB, whoever, but someone to talk about the possibility of getting on medication, and at least consider it. But if medicine is not for you, then you can try different routes, but at least speak to a doctor about what your options are. And then as far as the support group that I mentioned that I was talk about, my therapist talked to me about a podcast called Therapy for Black Girls. And I looked them up. I honestly haven't heard one of their podcasts yet, but when I looked them up, I learned that they have an app. It's through Mighty Networks, like that's the name of the app, and then you look up Therapy for Black Girls Community. And the way that they run their app is like a social network type thing, where you can post different things, you can like connect with different people, like you can follow them and message them directly. But something that I really like about this app is they do a lot of Zoom events, and they have like different series of events. But when I went in there, it wasn't an overwhelming number of people. Like it was enough people where you can still be heard. Like the second one that I went to, I shared, it was a check-in, and I shared how I was feeling throughout that week, and I felt very heard. And also is ran by people with PhDs in mental health, and I don't know what specifically, but basically is they're qualified to guide and facilitate those discussions without people causing more harm to themselves. Because sometimes if you're opening up about things that are very personal to you, if it's not done in a safe, I don't want to say safe space, but like because I know how people feel about that terminology, but if it's not done in an area where you can express yourself, yeah, safely, I'm sorry, but that's what it is. You can do more harm if it's not fully processed. But another thing that I really like about this app is they have social events via Zoom. Like they have like coloring nights, and also they just started a series about moving abroad for work and what that experience is like. And they're having one person talk about it a week. Anyways, I'm sharing all this to say that they have many events where you can feel connected to other people, and I didn't think that would help me as much as it did, but it honestly did. And just sitting in, I've sat in on 2 now, I felt very heard. Like I didn't realize how isolated I was making myself, because we have Beano downstairs, I've spent a lot of time in just one room upstairs while we were introducing the baby to him, because he was getting really excited. And then yeah, I just felt very disconnected from people. So having this group where I feel I can be heard, and I can feel like I'm socializing with other people, and it's not a mom specific group, but during the check-ins, I've heard other people talk about, you know, their kids and stuff like that, and just having people remember those details about you. And yeah, I feel like I'm making friends. There was one person specifically that I really identified with what she shared in one of the Zoom events that I went to, and then I ended up messaging her directly, like letting her know that, because she seems like someone that I'd want to build a relationship with. She's doing mindfulness retreat or something like that, so I guess she's not going to talk for a couple days, but I told her, yeah, I would love to hear about that. But anyways, the point is I was making friends. I feel like I can make friends using this, so I highly recommend that app. I typically try not to babble in my videos, but I feel like I definitely babbled quite a bit during this one, so I'm sorry about that. But with all that said, please let me know if you have any questions about baby blues or postpartum depression, and I will try my best to answer them based off of what I've experienced, and also based off the research that I've done. And I will try my best to offer up any more resources or suggestions. Yeah, just feel free to ask me any questions at all. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you would like to further support my content, please go to patreon.com/yourfriendjanellis to become a member of my Patreon. As you may know, Patreon is a way for fans to support the content that they love on a monthly basis. Members of my Patreon enjoy the exclusive benefits of a chat community, live streams, and guaranteed access to me via direct messaging. By supporting my Patreon, you're allowing me to dedicate the time and effort necessary to create, edit, and upload new videos on a weekly basis. Thank you so much for your support, and I appreciate you all.